Let's go ahead and take a look-see. We have got Tom Ohle from Evolve. We've got... Actually, I'll let you guys introduce yourself. You are live, by the way. Let's get you guys on here. Give us the elevator speech. Who are you? What do you do? Why are you here? Go, you first, Tom.
All right, I'll start. And humdinger is quite the Canadian way to introduce this show, I think.
Thank you.
So yeah, I run Evolve PR. I've been doing this way too long, and I've worked with various, or I think pretty much everybody on this cast in one way or another over the last 15 years or so. Yeah, that's about it. Now I just sort of sit there and make sure other people at the company have jobs. That's pretty much as useful as I am these days.
And I personally appreciate that.
Yeah.
Mary, why don't you go next?
Sure. My name's Mary. I am a senior producer at GameSpot, where I make videos and live streams about video games. That's pretty much it. I run a crazy team of a bunch of game-obsessed dudes, and we all play games and talk about them together. And I used to work with Kevin.
That's a great segue. Kevin, why don't you go next?
Hello, I'm Kevin. I write words and such for Larian Studios, working on Divinity Original Sin 2, and I used to work with Mary at GameSpot.
And then Arthur didn't work with anybody here. So sad.
No. I mean, Kevin and I used to be peers of a sort. We were both reviews editors. My name is Arthur Gies.
Yep.
I am the reviews editor at polygon.com, which is a website where we talk about video games sometimes. And I also do some hardware stuff here or there, a little bit of movie coverage. But primarily, I decide how we review things and whether we review things.
And you have an adorable kitty, which the internet will love.
I do have an adorable kitty.
I kicked my cat out of the office because I was like, "Get out, cat."
Good idea.
Yep.
Anyhow.
As chat says, Arthur has a kitty instant favorite. All right, guys. So we are here today to sort of give some insight into how devs or other people can get their games noticed by you guys, people in the media. So the first question is just that. What is the best way for a dev to get your attention?
I mean, I guess I'll start on that one since I make like a lot of direct coverage decisions. Email is good. Tweeting at me, not a good way to get my attention. An email with a very quick sort of synopsis as to what the game is, with the game title and the subject line, ideally. Something saying when it's coming out, and a suggestion as to when you would get it to us, if it's going to be soon. And most importantly is if you don't have a video, then there's a good chance that I'm not going to have time to research your game, like a video linked in the email. And if your video doesn't tell me within 30 or 40 seconds what the game is or give me a pretty good idea of what I'm in for, then that's not a great sign. Just because I have hundreds of emails a day, and I just don't have the time or the bandwidth to do like a full sort of research package on everything we get pitched.
Yeah, and I mean, so Arthur, I mean, you and then Kevin, when you were on the media side, had maybe a slightly different role, I guess, than where Mary is, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but I have to assume to some extent that a lot of developers don't really recognize that there's a difference, and they just go, I'm just going to send these people the exact same pitch, and everybody's going to get the same email at the same time. I mean, Mary, does it feel like most people are just kind of coming to you just for coverage, period, or is there more?
Yeah, you get a lot of copy and paste emails, and I'm used to that. I'm used to sifting through lots and lots of emails and looking for things that I like. But I also think sometimes fine tuning the emails can help get my attention. It separates yourself. I completely agree. The number one seller for me is your trailer. That is what convinces me whether or not I should proceed and learn more about the game. I will click on any link to a video just to see it. It seems worth it just to see it. So I think a trailer is so important. But what I I think a lot of devs don't understand is what makes a good trailer. You know, some people might think, okay, I need a really good trailer, so I'm going to hire like a really good guy to make awesome motion graphics, and that's not necessarily what I mean. It doesn't need to have this amazing cinematic music. It doesn't need to have crazy motion graphics flying all over the place. What it needs to do is tell me very quickly and succinctly, what do you do and what makes this unique? A lot of times that can be visual, but a lot of times it could be like a gameplay mechanic, and I need that to be shown, within a good minute. And I think if you can do that, then if you can condense that experience into a good 60 seconds, then that is the best pitch you can do for me. That is how I choose, I would say 90% of my games that I cover or put on live streams for E3 or any of that stuff. Anytime I do indie streams, it's trailer based.
Sure. I think that's definitely accurate. And I think that the mistake I see a lot of people make in the stuff that I get is to confuse press outreach with marketing. I don't really care about the bullet lists of features. Like, you're not selling me your game. You're telling me what it is, so I can decide as quickly as possible if it's something that it not only will we review it, but also is it something that I forward onto video? Is it something where a review doesn't necessarily make sense financially, but is this something we stream on Facebook? Is this a video that we make? Is this now it's like, is this something that we throw to Monster Factory? Like, decisions like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kevin, was it, pretty much the same in your case at the time?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm a little removed from all that now, but the one thing that would cause me to click away more often than not, and this was a huge number of emails that I would get, actually, is emails that were more interested in how the game was being sold. In other words, it was always a Kickstarter pitch, a Kickstarter pitch, a Kickstarter pitch. And I'm not interested. I didn't care. I don't care how the game was funded. I don't care about that kind of thing. What I cared about was the game. If the email is all about how it was funded or some kind of weird marketing gimmick, it didn't matter. It was the best way to get me to stop listening. That was that, and that was probably a good 75% of emails that I would get from, during different stages of the year. It's just Kickstarter, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's really tough. I think that, on our side, on the PR side, it's sort of there's always this desire to sort of, whether it's ingrained in us, like just from the onset, or if a client's pushing it, to sort of tell the story. And like, it's not so much, a matter of kind of perfecting that 2-second, here's the game pitch. It's more, okay, but we developed it in our backyard or something like that, or we did this, or we've been making it for 10 years or whatever. Make that the story, and this thought that that's going to make a difference, and that's going to sway somebody to go, okay, well, now this is interesting, so maybe I'll pay attention. But it's still always, from my perspective, it always feels like at the end of the day, it comes down to, okay, but we need to get them interested in the game itself, right? More than anything, right? And I don't know if there's if that's, because I found that some of the most effective pitches on my side have been literally, here's 8 words of why you should pay attention to this game, and then they're like, yeah, okay, that's great, sounds good, let's play it, rather than sort of a 700-word email, right?
Yeah. Know the publication too, if you can. I realize that's not, depending on your size, you can't always do that, but maybe Mary can corroborate this. Again, things have changed since I've been at GameSpot. But for example, another good way to make me just click through would be something VR related, because there was a time when VR got absolutely no traffic on GameSpot. Nobody was reading anything about VR, and so we weren't. Ultimately, you have to serve the audience, and if they're not reading about something, then you stop publishing things about that thing. And so just know the publication, know what it is that their audience sort of goes for, and if you don't know, just ask. And maybe there's a way we could accommodate it without spending too much bandwidth, like Arthur was saying with Monster Factory or whatever. There's ways we can cover things that might be not ideal, but it's something.
Yeah, I think that still reigns really true, Kevin. And I think, I do think it's important not just for developers to understand that we do things based on our audience, but we also do it for the benefit of the game itself. For example, our audience isn't always receptive to early access. They find that, they're not really interested in a game until it is officially out and they can go get the final product. We might not want to cover a lot of early access, not just because our audience doesn't like it, but what if we did cover it and then the audience doesn't like it because it's in early access? So you might think it would be great to get coverage on GameSpot, but if the audience is negative to it because of the state it's in, that's good reason to hold off until your game is ready, until it's coming out. That gives the first impression of your game to our audience the best impression that you can offer.
Yeah, I mean, how often do you guys see, in each of your roles, somebody pitching you something that's just totally not relevant? And I mean, I find that there's a difference between, there's a lot of companies and PR reps or whatever that just, they have a list of people that they just blast everything to. It's just press releases and they send them out the door. But people who just fundamentally go, okay, I'm going to send this person an email because I think they're going to be interested, but it's just totally not at all relevant.
Every day.
Yeah.
Literally multiple times a day, every day. Even on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah. Do you think that's just an issue of people not sort of doing their research, or just, not making the connection and going, okay, I really do think this is something that you guys would be interested in? But
I think charitably people are hoping that we'll be interested, regardless of what our thing is, that some PR people tell themselves that this thing is so good that everyone will care, right? And, that's someone being an advocate for their product, and it doesn't hurt that thing necessarily, because the worst I can say is no still. But it does lead to a lot of noise in my inbox, like an incredible amount of noise in my inbox.
And so I think for the sake of a lot of people that the people that are watching or watch this in the future, that noise, how much are you guys having to deal with that? We've talked about it about a million times, and part of what we want to do is really try and cut down on that and really only send you guys stuff that's relevant. But what's, quantify that a little bit, just so that people can understand just how much of an issue it actually is.
Well, looking at my inbox right now, in the last 3 days, I have about 400 emails that I haven't read yet. All of which are from work. Most of which are press releases, a lot of which are contacts asking us for coverage. And that's not including the things that I've archived or read already, and I'm pretty proactive about all that. So, hundreds of emails a day is the norm for me. I assume that for Mary it might actually be worse because she's got a GameSpot email address.
It's probably about the same. I'm not in reviews. I would suspect that Peter Brown or Justin Haywald or Randolph Ramsey are probably just swamped with emails. Features doesn't seem to be as crazy, but we get a lot of emails all the time. Yeah, and I don't think this is something where we should always just say oh, we just get so many emails. A lot of times it's also, the frequency or the redundancy of it all. Sometimes I get 3 emails for the same game or something, so I get really adapted to kind of seen it. And my fear is that because I do that, I could miss something. So I think that's just kind of more important, that when something does catch my eye, and I would say it has to happen at least a couple times a week where I've never seen that game before and it catches my eye, that must be valuable. I'm not sure exactly if it works like this at other sites, but I know for me, our features team has a pitch process. So even if I see a game, and even if you've got my attention and I'm that looks cool, I still have to pitch it to a team of people and say, you guys, what do you think? Does anybody else want to play this? Do you think it's worth me, my time, so that I can play it and we have to talk about it? Just because I'm interested doesn't mean it's a done deal. And I've even liked games and lost the pitch process where nobody else felt the same way. So it's I need the fodder, not just the inspiration that your game is good, but I also need the material for me to bring it back to my team and be like, this is why we need to cover this. Mm-hmm. So there's like almost like a 2-step process there.
And so that's interesting. No, go ahead, Arthur.
I think to add to that a little bit, what Mary is saying about having to pitch, our process isn't necessarily similar, but I do think that you have to assume when you're emailing someone at an outlet that they might be the person you're emailing, but the chance of them being the person that's covering the thing is not good. For us, I get thrown stuff all the time, and even if I find something interesting, I'm still showing it to other people to see if they'll write about it, especially for a video or early access opportunity, because I'm a reviews editor. I get a lot of other stuff, and we can't review everything. And so I'm usually shooting it over to our video Slack or to like one of our video leads and saying, does this seem like something that we should hit? And then they'll ask other people. And so it's not just, it can't just be targeted to me to get my attention. It needs to be something that people hopefully like are grabbed by, and to do it quickly is incredibly important, because it's like 2 to 5 minutes of my time, then it's 2 to 5 minutes of someone else's time, then 2 to 5 minutes of someone else's time, and eventually it's asking a lot. And I know it doesn't seem like it, but it all piles on top of everything, and I've got tasks besides email that I have to do on a regular basis. So,
and be conscious of timing is something that happens. I mean, certainly all of us have been in a situation where it's the busy season and suddenly we're getting 500 emails, and we can barely keep up with the huge games that are coming out right then and there, and we just can't. There's not enough bandwidth. There's not enough time. But Tom, you sort of know this. I mean, we were talking about Original Sin 2 related things, and you have to, you sit down and you should look at the calendar and say, what's the best day for us to hit press? Well, this is coming out, and this is coming out in this week, and this is coming out in this week. We need to be conscious about that and go to the outlets, know when they're going to be less busy.
And that's actually that. Yeah, that's a great segue, I think, to something that, Arthur, we've talked about, probably to the point of being totally sick of talking about it, is, timing of assets or pitches or whatever. I mean, typically how long do you guys have to, or how long in advance do you guys like to hear about something that, in terms of, obviously reviews and features are going to be a slightly different situation, but realistically, how long does it take you to go from pitch to vetting that pitch internally to playing the game to producing the content to editing to publishing that final thing?
It can take at least a couple of days sometimes to figure out if something is worth covering, if it's something we've never heard about, because people are going into meetings, people are on, for me, like, we are a distributed site, and so we've got people in New York and people in San Francisco, and so we're dealing with time differences and people going into meetings and things like that, and so it can take some time for the ball to sort of lob over the net back and forth. And so a couple of days to know whether or not it's something that we can even like devote time to is good. And then the sooner we know when we would be able to expect something, the more we can plan for it. Like, if I have enough time, I can plan for almost anything. But when we're down to a week before launch, there's a good chance that there's already something else happening at the same time. 2 weeks before launch, a little dicey. 3 weeks before launch, maybe a sweet spot. A month is a good amount of time. The only thing that I would almost worry about is it getting a little lost in the shuffle because there's so much time. And I know that this feels like threading a needle, but that's what it is for us. Like, and it's not just me. I don't think that it's just me, but it's just constant triage. Like, we plan for the worst, we hope for the best and plan for the worst, and are often surprised anyway.
Yeah. On your side, Mary, I mean, how long's, a typical feature? I mean, you guys are, in your case, it's a little different because sometimes, and Arthur, you do this too, is you'll have live streams and things like that that can potentially get turned around a little quicker. But in terms of actual feature stories, it's a sizable process, especially depending on, obviously, the depth of that story.
Yeah, absolutely. We go through the same issue where if you let me know and your game's coming out that week, it's probably too late. Live streams are really quick turnaround, you're right. But that Monday, I already have a notebook filled with things, and they each have a day or sometimes 2 days allocated to them, so that week is already booked. I would say I've worked with developers before, and my favorite system is when they say, hey, I'm going to be in town 3 or 4 weeks from now. I could stop by with the demo. That is like a really nice amount of time. I can be like, cool, 3 weeks from now, my week is still empty. I can do that. Or I know I'm going to have a build of my game ready, you know, or my build is ready now and it's releasing in 3 to 4 weeks. Could you take a look at it now and make a feature? I can do that now. So those are the perfect times. And I agree. I think 3 weeks is a really nice time. 2 weeks, you're kind of pushing it. And 1 week, I think it's just unlikely. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It's just you're pushing your own luck then.
So
yeah, and that 3 week gap is sort of what we've been really pushing internally, and that's what we drive a lot of clients to do. Is 3 weeks, I think, is the sweet spot, because to your point, I mean, it really is, even for us, like threading the needle, where it's a month is, you really do feel like you get a lot of sort of non-committal responses. It's like, yeah, maybe sounds all right, but it's too far out. And it does get infinitely more difficult as we get a little closer to launch. I mean, does it help even? Because a lot of cases, what we'll encounter is that we know a game is going to be launching, say, a month from now, but we don't know when we're going to get code in hand or something like that, right? I mean, how can you guys, or do you accommodate for that, where you can say, well, at least let's carve out some time? Because in my mind, at least, that's something that we think might work, or that we think we can do, but I'm not necessarily sure if that's actually the case, if that actually happens.
It depends on the game, honestly. I like some games we will go out of our way to carve out time for when things are unclear, but I especially for a game that we've never heard of, or from a developer that nobody's ever heard of, it's just hard to say, if you give it to us late, then maybe we can still do this thing. Or if you don't know when you're going to get it to us, then maybe we can still do this thing. But like the second that there's uncertainty on timing on your end, your being the indefinite developer, PR, your here, that just means that it's sliding off the table very quickly for us, because we've got a lot of other stuff to plan around, and we've talked before about how there's fewer and fewer windows where indies can be safe now.
Yeah.
So
no, go ahead, Erica.
Oh no, because I'm changing the topic, so go ahead, Top. Okay, so you guys have kind of talked about how important it is for trailers and things to just grab you right away. Could you kind of go into what is it about a trailer that can grab you? Is it the aesthetic? Is it the gameplay? Like, what is it that can really grab you in those couple minutes that you have with the trailer?
I think it's easier to talk about what doesn't right away, which is extended logo crawls. I don't really care about your title treatment, unless the title treatment is something that's very key to the game. Honestly, the title should probably be at the end of the trailer. I don't care what the name of your studio is insofar as that video. Like, none of that stuff, it's not there. It's not a business card. It's not brand identification. It's like education. And the longer I'm sitting waiting for the gameplay to start, it doesn't build suspense for me. It feels like it's wasting my time. Because again, I'm not being marketed to. Like, you're not trying to sell me something. You're trying to say, you have a limited amount of time, like an extreme limited amount of time. And now not only am I asking for some of it, I'm using some of it to make you think about whether or not I can have some of it. So getting to the point quickly without a lot of fluff is generally the thing that grabs me the most.
Voiceover is a... Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say voiceover does not move me typically. I avoid that when you can, especially because when there is voiceover, it tends to go for the usual video game cliches. Another thing that would typically turn me off if I hear a world where your decisions really do make a difference. I mean, things like that, when you've heard it in a trailer 20 times, 30 times, 50 times, 100 times, it's easy to dismiss. You need to really find what's special about your game and make sure it's communicated really, really quickly.
To add to the list of things that we do not, or I feel like doesn't help, would be text over gameplay. I think most of the time, 99% of the time, you should be able to convey what you want to convey with gameplay, not with text. I don't want to know how many power-ups you have or how many levels there are. I'd rather just see the levels. I don't need to know if it's co-op because I should be able to see two different players on the screen. I often find that text obscures the screen from real estate that I want so that I can see the full picture of what it would be like if I were to play your game. Now, there's times when text is good, like maybe if you're telling me that, even things like procedural generation, I can see it. Typically, you can see that stuff, and it's not necessary to literally tell me that stuff. And also, that's what your bullet points are for. I think a gameplay trailer is meant to show me gameplay, so I don't need a lot of the edits. It can be nice. I think clean gameplay is what you want to convey the most important parts of your game, which is like what is it about your game that I could identify with other games, and then what is it about your game that separates it from other games?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that we end up running into sometimes. I think especially, Kevin, you're on the other side now, and you're, I think, working on a game that is among those that can be really hard to kind of convey in a short amount of time. Big RPGs, we always had a problem with it when I was at BioWare, when we were working on the Witcher stuff. It's like, even a half-hour, 45-minute E3 demo is like, it's impossible to show you why this game is special, right? Or not necessarily impossible. It becomes much more difficult than, some certain action games or something where you can really showcase a specific kind of cinematic set piece or something like that, right? But is that something that you have to think about now?
Well, it's not something in my day-to-day job I ever have to think about anymore. I don't think about. But we've talked before, like when I've been asked to write scripts for trailers and things like that at Larian. One of the most important things for me is to avoid. Sometimes you want to communicate something that sounds an awful lot like another game has already communicated. For example, I brought up the choice thing before, which is certainly a big part of Original Sin 2. So it becomes a matter of how do we present this in a way that gets the point across without saying it the same way that's been said about 7,000 other games already. We already live in a world with BioWare games and Witcher games and so forth that already make a big deal out of personal choice. So what do we say about the way we do it that is truly special? And so we actually think very, very deeply about issues like that, specifically so we can get the attention that we certainly believe we deserve. But it's easy for something to fall through the cracks when, in a superficial way, it may sound like a lot of other things that you've already played.
Go ahead.
Just
to speak to that a little bit, I think that, speaking to what Kevin was saying about the game being more complicated, with something like Divinity, if you have a game on that scope, and this isn't a mistake that Divinity made, so just throw that out there. If I'm not hearing about that game until a month before it comes out, you fucked up pretty hard already. With a game that big, if you've been working on it that long, I think that your sort of obligation, if a 30-second trailer isn't going to do the job, then you need to get out there a lot earlier and give outlets an opportunity to play the game early, to talk about it in a way that is more in depth than a trailer would be. Like, you need to build relationships so that people can see your stuff and play your stuff and talk about it in advance, because that's one of the ways that they'll sort of know later on if it's worth investing that sort of time and sealing the deal and doing more video coverage and doing a review of. And you look at something like Divinity, which is not like a massive game from like a AAA standpoint, but a very like big game like that a lot of people worked on. Like, people played Divinity well before it was out. There were previews. There was a cycle to that game, and I think a lot of indie games try to skip the cycle, thinking that if they send something out a week before release, that all of a sudden they'll shoot to the top of Polygon or GameSpot or be featured in a bunch of videos, and it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge to, combining those points, like to Kevin's point about having difficulty conveying what makes your game unique is, I think, one of the biggest challenges for game devs. And I, part of that challenge may be that there isn't anything unique, right? And that's something that we see all the time is a developer goes, well, but our game is the best version of this. But until unless you can sort of qualify that in some way, or if there still has to be something different, right? I mean, could you guys see yourself playing a top-down 2D roguelike right now? I mean, it just seems to me like there are certain genres that are so saturated that whatever you make in that genre, unless you're totally redefining the wheel in some way, but is it even possible to get attention with a game that is more of the same, but different story, or a few different mechanics or something here and there?
I mean, it depends on what time of year it is, which is another conversation that we've obviously had repeatedly in public and in private. That right now, like, my last week was completely occupied by Dishonored, and Phil Collar just got Final Fantasy 15, and I'm waiting on a bunch of other games, and I've got a Tyranny review to edit, and it's fall. So no, right now, a top-down 2D roguelike would not be a game that I would dedicate time to, because are you crazy? And December is also hard because December, everybody's tired. I haven't had a day off in like 10 weeks. So in December, no, I'm probably also not going to care so much about a top-down 2D game. In January, maybe. February?
January is a good time.
Yeah, because nothing's coming out in January.
I mean, you say that now,
nothing.
but just you say that now, but just wait for every indie dev that waited through Q4 because they were like, okay, that's a terrible time to launch, so let's launch in January.
Yeah, there's not enough of us, and there's too many games. So yeah. Nothing is a guarantee of coverage. No matter what you do, you can follow the whole playbook and not get coverage.
One thing that always, I think, helped when PR establishes relationships with the people at outlets, they also begin to pick up on their various tastes and aesthetics and so on and so forth. So, for example, Original Sin is going to be interesting to GameSpot because we gave its predecessor a PC Game of the Year. And in addition, the original Sin, sounds stupid when I say that, but when Original Sin, was being, in the early stages, they knew to come to me because Larry knew to come to me because Larry knew that this was a game that I liked. This is the kind of game that this person at GameSpot likes. Let's go to him because we know that this is his taste, his interest. And I think it helps when you know the tastes and interests of various people at various outlets, because then it gives you an idea of who to go to and who's going to be more interested and who to spend more time talking to, who's more likely to cover it, if not now, then certainly later.
Yeah. So, on that note, I mean, we've talked about being able to, or you guys liking specific games, and how often does it happen that you really like a game, but just for whatever reason aren't able to cover it, whether it's because it's too busy or because you're kind of vetoed internally or whatever it happens to be? I mean, from our side, we're looking at it going, I feel like it's a good game, so people should be paying attention to it. But there are so many different scenarios and reasons that might not happen. I mean, how often does that end up happening to you guys where you're like, man, I really wish I could cover this, but just can't?
A lot.
Fairly often, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a bummer, actually. I don't, people don't see that, the hard choices and the battles that I and many other people lose here every day when we say, this game looks good, does anyone want to cover it? They say no. Like, sorry, nobody has the time here, and our freelancers aren't interested, and this guy is off for a week, so we lost our video editor, and we're doing news in-house, and You have 3 things to edit today, but if you want to tack it on the end, you can. And then I think about that value. And every once in a while, I do take that on and I do work those extra hours just to cover it because I think it's that valuable. And then sometimes I lose that battle with myself and I say, no, I'd rather eat dinner at home because I don't do that as much as I should. I find that we often make self-sacrifices for games that we like, and that's not fair. Like I do what I love and I do make sacrifices for it, but sometimes, we have to do things. We have to make really tough calls because we want to see the sun a little bit or something. Then that should be valued, I think.
There were times where I would be, for example, in the middle of playing something for review that I would then have to just drop, and it never got reviewed, specifically because something that's just objectively more important that has to be covered will come in. And when you have limited staff and limited hours, limited time, you just have to do what you have to do. And there are lots of games that I regret never covering. Many of them things that I was in the middle of playing and then had to abandon, which wasn't that common, but happened enough where I often wonder what if I'd been able to actually talk about this game more than I ever had the chance to.
Which always feels the worst, right? Especially because it's not just you can't write about this thing that you like, it's that you wasted a bunch of time. And it is wasted for lack of a better term, because it's time that you could have spent doing something that get published. But, I dumped 15 hours into this game and now we're not going to write a review because I've got to do this other thing. And I can think of a couple games off the top of my head. I mean, it happened for me with Neon Struct, which was a game I really liked, but something came up and I wasn't able to run a review. We were able to do video, and I was glad for that, but we didn't get a review up. We didn't review Pac-Man Championship Edition 2 because we only got it on PC and there was a massive bug in it with controller support. And so it wasn't working. We didn't get a version of it until it was too late and there was other stuff to do. And so it's not like it's only little games that get steamrolled that way. Like mid-tier games, like AA games or sort of arcade titles also get buried that way because that's just sort of the environment we're in. There are just so many games that we just don't have time for everything.
And when you see something go up that wasn't your thing, that a lot of times we don't choose based on whether we actually think one game is more important. We choose because of what we have the time for. So many times there would be a game that I would probably rather play and review, but I know that I only have, say, 2 hours for playing something. And so I'm going to have to choose the 2-hour game that I know that I can start and finish in that time and write about, because I don't have time for the 6-hour game or the 8-hour game or the 50-hour game. And so a lot of times, you would see something for me that seemed like, well, why is Kevin spending the time on this tiny little thing? That's the reason why, because I feel like there has to be something to do with this time that I can squeeze in. And I can't, you don't want to spend all your time with AAA games. And, I never thought of us as just serving to the audience all the things they demand, but we also have to be able to be tastemakers as well. But sometimes when you're a tastemaker, you can only choose something to the moon size as opposed to No Man's Sky size or something like that.
I think that's really true, Kevin. Like, there's sometimes, this does happen from time to time, where I'll look at my week and I'll realize I have a free afternoon. I have an afternoon. It's not a lot of time. It's 4 hours. What do you do in 4 tiny hours? Well, that is enough time for me to get gameplay up, or that's enough time for me to play a game and do a live stream. That's valuable. So we do that a lot, where I realize that is not a lot, but I can prep, plan, and have a really nice, entertaining live stream based on a game in that amount of time. But it cannot be for a game that requires 10 hours of practice. It has to be something that I can pick up and play pretty quickly. And those games are a lot easier for me to cover for a feature. And we work with our reviews team a lot. For example, Peter will now tell me, like, I don't have time we can't review it. We just don't have the people, but I think it deserves coverage. And I'll be like, okay, then that's something I could put in that afternoon. So we try to make those checks and balances based on where we can fit things in.
Yeah,
So,
I think that the thing to remember is that I think that this probably goes for everyone here, that we want to advocate for stuff we think is cool. Like, we go out of our way to try to advocate for stuff that we think is cool. It's just like we need to be given the opportunity or the sort of resources to do it in a timely fashion, because it's not just writing about what people care about, it's writing about what people care about when they'll probably care about it.
right. So related to that, I mean, we all know that I think that a lot of the challenge that we end up seeing is we'll have a developer say, our game's great, and we'll go, yeah, we agree. And they just go, well, why isn't Outlet X covering the game? And we've talked about a million different reasons why that might be. At the end of the day, to some extent, there's still that sort of ad revenue thing, the traffic thing that has to play into it. I mean, it's a business still, after all. I mean, is it feasible for a game that you guys get really passionate about personally to get more than that one-off piece of coverage because we're able to do it if they don't have a huge community and they're not driving traffic? I mean, is that something that sometimes you just have to go, yeah, I mean, I like the game and all, but realistically our readers or whatever, the company as a whole is better served by us doing this other story we have to, right? Is that something that for an upstart indie dev with a cool game? I mean, have you guys just had to make that kind of tough call and go, yeah, as much as I really, really want to play this, we can't keep covering it over and over again?
That's definitely.
It depends on the game. I think that there's some stuff that is just so... If it's a game that isn't just about the game, but it's about the moments that people have playing the game, I think that that's easier to sort of go back to the well on. Like something like, I don't think Gang Beasts has ever done bang up traffic for us, as an example, or someone like Giant Bomb, but that's like a good go-to piece of ridiculous content if
Right.
we don't have a game to live stream on a Friday on Facebook. Stuff like that. Towerfall is a game that was extremely well regarded and well covered, even if it didn't set the world on fire sales wise, because it was a game of moments between people as much as it was like this cool 8-bit fighter or whatever.
So kind of changing the topic on you guys a bit, conventions. There's a lot of them. And when you go to conventions and you see games at conventions, what makes you want to cover a game at a convention? Your E3 coverage, your PAX coverages. What really makes you decide, I'm going to cover this game out of the probably hundreds that you'll see there?
I'll take a swing at that because I do a lot of conventions, and as a feature producer, I literally walk around with a 50-pound backpack that's meant to be able to record your voice and get footage of your game, and I carry that shit around for 12 hours and I look, and that's my job, and I look, and I do it based on a few things. I pick things based on visual appearance. I'll never forget, trying to think of now I want to try to even remember the convention and everything, but I want to say PAX East, I saw a stuffed animal slug creature and I was like, that's weird, I'm gonna try it, and it was Rain World, and now I'm obsessed with that game, and I would play it and talk about it, and I try to talk about it with people, and I've given them a couple times of coverage based on a stuffed animal because I didn't see it a lot, and I thought that was really neat. At the end of the day, I think Rami used to say this, you can put all this stuff on your tent and put all these bright colors and everything and music and blast and try to get everyone's attention, but you do have to have a solid game, right? There's a lot of things that catch my attention, but I am going to play your game for 5 or 10 minutes, and if it can't grab me, if it can't keep me there, I'll probably move on. But the things that get my attention are unique things that I see. Sometimes it's kitschy things. I'm really into visual design, unique visual design, and audio-based things will typically catch my attention. And then I'm looking for gameplay mechanics when I pick up the controller to see. And word of mouth really happens at conventions. Through Twitter, I will hear if anybody else is talking about a game, and then I will make my way to that booth to play it. So there's a couple of things like that. I don't want people to just have these loud blaring booths all the time, but I will tell you that having a distinct visual design that can catch my eye, something that's more than just a TV of people playing your game, can help me just pick up that controller. Another example would be 2 years ago I played Jotun, which is like it's hand-drawn, and it's like just giant boss fights, but it's all hand-drawn. And so all their artwork around their booth was hand-drawn, and they even had the artist there drawing, and I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, things like that really helped just help me get there, help me get my hands on the controller. And then once you got that and I'm playing it, that's the best step in the best direction for me.
Yeah, our on that point, would you say a trade show or a convention is an effective place for you guys to find out about games? I mean, to some extent, it's got to be just overload and really hard to sort of remember a game that you've seen. But maybe, is it just good, sort of like a food court, sort of sample everything and have stuff stick out?
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely happen. I mean, at GameSpot, at least in all the years that I went to things like E3, we had set appointments where we were going to all the things that were agreed upon beforehand and going to see this game and that game and the other. But we always had floor time specifically so that we could go out and discover things that we thought were particularly interesting. So stuff that's out there and easy to play that doesn't require standing in a really long line is always helpful. So having enough of the game and enough televisions and consoles and so forth for lots of people to play the game is always very helpful. And having somebody on hand that is both passionate and knowledgeable about the game is super helpful.
But not a jerk.
Yeah, and
not a PR jerk. Yeah.
Run into plenty of jerks, and somebody who can, who can clearly communicate what the game is about and do it in a fun or passionate way is always very helpful. Somebody who's more eloquent than I am at 2 a.m. in the morning.
I think it really can't go stated enough, though, to be careful with. I know we laugh when we say jerk, but I've told people actually I'm on my way to an appointment, which is the truth. We book appointments back to back to back, and I've had people get mad. And I'll remember your game now, and not in a good way. I would be very careful with that kind of stuff. I am there to cover games and learn about them because I love them. It's not in any way good to get mad at someone who does not have the time because they can help you later. I have walked past games and said, I do not have time, but I'm going to remember that name. I do. And I do remember those games. I did not have time at TGS last year to play Manifold Garden. It looks cool. I remembered the name. It's in my brain. I'm going to check it out when I have the time. Don't be a jerk. I got it. Give me a second. I'm working on it. But we remember those things.
Yeah, that's a good rule across the board, actually. Don't be a jerk.
True.
Certainly, because if somebody is a jerk, you do remember that. And that doesn't mean just at a trade show, but just an online presence.
And do you guys get a lot of that hostility? I mean, there's a million sort of famous developer breakdowns or whatever, but you guys get a lot of like, oh, you don't want to cover my game, fuck you.
I think less so now than a few years back. I think the sort of inevitable march towards the PR message has made that more limited. I think like 10 years ago, it was a much more likely thing. But yeah, I mean, sometimes people are assholes. The trade shows are stressful, like for everybody. Yeah. So I get it. I get being in a pissy mood. I would say, and I don't know if this is controversial or not, but if you're a game without a publisher or a game without a bigger publisher, I don't know why you're at E3. I think that increasingly sites like ours and even GameSpot, like GameSpot does a live show and they've got 50 slots over the course of 3 days. Does that sound about right? And what are the chances that your game that nobody has heard of is going to be on that live show? And if you're not on the live show, what are the chances that not only are you going to be written up on the site, but is anybody going to see that write-up? I think over time, coverage and metrics have sort of shown us that coverage of small games at E3, nobody reads it. Coverage of big games at E3, a lot of times people don't read it very much. So it's the same struggle there as everything else. And also, I think stuff like PAX is good for consumer awareness and word of mouth, but for coverage, it's kind of hard because I don't know a lot of outlets that do particularly good traffic on their PAX stuff.
No, we did some research actually this year, and basically, I mean, among traditional media, actually, you guys end up doing a lot more coverage of PAX games than, let's say, YouTubers and Twitch streamers who, you know, our clients are like, we need this guy to play this game. We need this person in our booth, and there's no cover. Like, they'll do a vlog once every 3 days going, hey, I hung out with these people at a party at PAX, and that's sort of the extent of their coverage. But at the same time, you see a noticeable decrease compared to even E3 or something like that. Actual dedicated coverage.
If you're showing at PAX or to a lesser extent E3 or Gamescom, the best way to get media to cover your stuff right now is to let them get direct feed.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely something that we recommend for sure.
Like, not B-roll, not a trailer. Like, if we can get direct feed, then that's something that only we have that we can put on YouTube.
Yeah, it's such a smart thing to say. Give me direct feed. I can't cover it without direct feed.
Not only that, but set up your booth. Like, get some HDMI splitters and some strippers, and set up your booth so that like we can just walk over and plug our thing in and capture. Yep. And make sure that we can plug our thing in and capture, because your weird flash card USB drive capture solution is never going to work the way that you think it will.
Yeah, prep turning off HDCP in advance so that I'm not sitting there making other people wait longer. It should be ready to go. It should be tested and ready to go.
I mean, if you do that, if your booth is like ready for us to capture, not only does that make us, and tell us about it, tell us that we can get direct feed, tell us that it's set up to easily get capture, because that lets us take another appointment. Like, that cuts the time in half that we have to spend there, and it makes it a much easier sell. And not only that, but then we tell other press, we're like, yeah, we just showed up, they were all ready, like it was an easy get. Like, if you're an easy get at a show like that, for video in particular, then that makes us exponentially more likely to cover you.
Yeah, and USBs aren't that expensive anymore too. You can also give us your assets, or have an email ready saying like, you know, we have assets ready for you to go, like, so that I don't have to look for them, or God forbid, Google your game and look for an image.
Or download them over the hotel Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, downloading assets over hotel Wi-Fi at a show like that is a disaster. So
they're not that expensive anymore. You can give me like some generic B-roll, your trailer, and a quick summary about your game, and it's just like, boom, that made it 10 times easier and faster to do something really quick with this, do a quick feature.
Yeah, so at trade shows, in terms of coverage, I mean, so Arthur, you kind of mentioned it a little bit, is, you know, there has to be sort of an upper limit to how much you can cover effectively at a show that and actually drive traffic to it, right? I mean, because you only have so much sort of feature space. I mean, is it really a matter of, you'd think that maybe there's a couple stories a day that people might sort of see extensively?
I think that it depends. Like, we're entering a different era where it's not just about the front page. Like, it's also about like Facebook and Twitter, like social media sharing. And Facebook, the way it shares things is very opaque and semi-random. And so something that we put up today may not show up in your feed until tomorrow or the day after. Right. But I just think it's not just you competing with other stuff on our front page, it's you competing with the internet at large now, because like, if it's a story of ours about your game on Facebook, even if it shows up in your feed, and there's absolutely no guarantee that it will, like, it's next to like a cat photo and next to like some weird political story, like as someone's scrolling by. And so, you know, we ideally are writing and posting in those spaces in a way that will get people's attention. But I mean, if your game is not able to grab someone's interest right away, then there's even less that we can do than normal to make sure that someone sees it.
Is the onus on devs then to make games or features of their games that seem inherently sort of shareable? I mean, we see it there's a million games that are coming out that are sort of geared toward Twitch and YouTube, obviously, for whatever reason, or, in some way, whether it's game mechanics or theme.
I think you need to know what you want your game to be and know how you want people to play it and share it and experience it and the scale, and find some kind of middle ground there. Like, if you're making a game for you, that's great. Like, people like you are the only people that are going to buy it. But if it's for you and someone you like who isn't exactly like you, then maybe that's like more ground to cover sales wise. But I don't know.
I mean, social media helps in getting getting indie word out too, in the sense that, for example, I get a lot of stuff starts getting retweeted around Screenshot Saturday, for example. I'll see little gifs going around, and that's sort of how I got turned on to things like a game called Totem Teller, which I'd never heard of before, until suddenly these screens are being passed around on Twitter all the time. And suddenly I'm like, this game is gorgeous. This is something that, that if I were still at GameSpot, that I would have on my radar and I would be sure to cover. It's how we discovered To the Moon. I never got anything in my email about To the Moon. People were talking about it on Twitter. And so sometimes just something entering like that sphere is enough. And the other thing we would do at GameSpot too is for the trade shows, we wouldn't necessarily cover it right then and there. There are a lot of things that we would see, and we would plan out for weeks. We want people to see this, but it's going to be covered by Call of Duty and Mass Effect coverage, for example. When do you, in a week and a half on a Tuesday, at 8 a.m, this can go up, because then people will be seeing it and it won't be buried. So if you don't have something go up right away from a trade show, take heart. That doesn't mean that we can't still cover it, and it'll probably actually get more eyeballs on it later than it would right now.
Yeah, you compile all those memories. I've seen things from Screenshot Saturday and said, "Oh, that looks nice," but I didn't do anything with it. But then I would see it at a trade show and I'd be like, "Wow, I remember seeing that not that long ago." And then I get an email about it and I'm like, "All right, that's enough for me. Like, that's a lot, and I've seen it enough where now I feel like it gives me a second take." So all that stuff compiles. Nothing is ever wasted. Just because it didn't result in a feature doesn't mean that it didn't affect us. So that kind of stuff does compound over time. And man, I really do have to give another nod to Screenshot Saturday. I scroll through the hashtag Screenshot Saturday every Saturday. It's probably one of my favorite parts of Saturday. I see all sorts of really cool new stuff from that. So that's such a smart thing that has started, and I think people should continue to use it. I still use it every week.
Yep. I think just to go along with that a little bit, and it may seem counterproductive or counteractive, is that in some ways the cart can actually be put before the horse in the covered cycle. That if we check Reddit, we check GAF, we check social media, we look for things that people are interested in, and if we haven't covered it and we see that a lot of people are interested, then we're more inclined to sort of go and see what's up, like see that people are interested. Like, the best example of the last couple of years is like one of the most successful games of the last couple of years, because I don't think that there was a single outlet, not even Kotaku, that was covering Five Nights at Freddy's when it broke the first time. And it just developed a following, and that forced us to take a look at it, because it was like this weird, goofy, creepy thing that no one on our side particularly cared about enough to write about. But eventually, like, there's so much buzz and sort of conversation around it that we don't have a choice but to look at it. And obviously not every game will be able to do that, but it does suggest that if you've got a passionate audience that's organic, not astroturfed, that we can be convinced to go back, like we can be convinced to do a Facebook stream, like, and if it's the right game, maybe even do a review, like, after people know what it is. Stardew Valley is another example of a game that really nobody covered before it came out, and then it just started snowballing on buzz like crazy, and people paid attention. So
This is why discoverability is really important too. I mean, one way that I will know what's interesting to people and what people are playing is to pull up Steam, and to see what the top sellers are, to see what's coming up, to see what the new releases are, and so on and so forth. And the same is true on Xbox Live and the PlayStation Network. So having a way to see what people are playing and what people are interested in is really important, which is why every Steam update, my heart sinks just a little bit because it becomes a little bit harder and harder to sort of discover what's trending at a particular time or what might be worth covering.
So you guys have kind of talked about some of the things that, get your attention. Does swag help at all? Like if you get in your mailbox something really cool, does that make you want to cover it? And I see the head shakes.
Actively make me not want to cover it much.
It means a trip to the garbage 2 floors below my apartment.
Sometimes I feel bad. I've gotten stuff that I feel like from an indie developer that must have cost him a lot of money. And I mean, I won't mention it like specifically, but I remember once Peter was like, should I mail it back? Because I feel like it cost a lot. And it just was a sad moment. We don't want your stuff. Your game should speak for yourself. We don't want your monogrammed items. None of that stuff is important to me.
Take the money that you would spend on swag and spend more on your PR person and your marketing.
That's a great thing to say. I totally agree.
I'm sure, but I mean, it's true. When we talk, like, I know that money is tight on these smaller development studios, and that, they're paying for PR, but they can only sort of pay for so much help, like so much time. But I think that, God, like twice as much time from your PR person is worth infinitely more than like a weird box with stuff in it.
Yeah.
Or like a plastic tchotchke, or even if it's really big, like it's just garbage.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a person who covers games desks? It's filled with shit. It's got stuff we like. It's got those stupid PopCap dolls. It's got crap all over it. And
amiibos.
And it's got like controllers and USBs, and we don't need it. When Kevin left, this is true, he left like 400 USBs behind. Yep. We don't know what to do with them all. We have them.
When I first started doing this job, I had statues everywhere, and then when I left, I was just like, okay, yeah, sure, you can have this Eddie from Brutal Legend statue that's worth hundreds of dollars on eBay. I don't want it. I don't care. Just please take it away from me.
If you have to do that, at least make it something useful. The best piece of swag I ever got that I ever cared about was DC Universe Online chapstick. Because it was something it was something I could use and something that I would look at and see DC Universe Online whenever I used it. So it's probably the most effective swag I ever got.
Throw your assets in your B-roll on a branded USB stick or something if you really want to send something.
I have
like
to
send us
say,
something that we can use.
The best swag that I've gotten so far was at TwitchCon, and it was Vainglory breath mints. And they were amazing. They had Vainglory on them, and they were really good breath mints. And we actually were rating, like, we went back and got more of them than what they had given us in the swag bag. Brilliant. Brilliant.
I've gotten branded hand sanitizer before.
Yeah, I've gotten that. That's pretty quality as well. I must admit, hand sanitizer is a good idea. Once somebody gave me a tiny liquor bottle. I don't think I could recommend that, but I remember it.
Nice. All right, well, guys, we are going to wrap it up here. We are out of time. I'll let you all sort of give one last word before we wrap up. Kevin, since you're on the other side of the pond there, I do believe, why don't you start so you can finish first?
I think you should go buy and play Divinity Original Sin 2 Early Access, but of course I'm going to say that. Because it's rad.
Right on cue.
And I missed Mary and Arthur.
No.
Arthur, go ahead.
If this is an educational thing, just get to the point as quickly as possible. When you're pitching us, just please get to the point as quickly as possible. Let us know if we can do our job and cover your stuff. Otherwise, go to polygon.com, which is a website.
Exactly. Plugs.
Mary?
Hi. I am a video aficionado. I look at video. I want your gameplay. I want your raw gameplay. I want to see your game. I want to see it honestly. I don't need fancy stuff. I want to see what your game looks like. Oh, and we do just put up gameplay on the site, and we look at it and stuff. You can send it to, I think it's gsfiles@gamespot.com, and we'll look at your gameplay, so you can do that. Yeah, so please send that to me. And I miss Kevin too. I miss him.
You just have to go to Belgium now and see him. We'll have to set up a press tour or something like that, and everyone.
Seriously, it's been a really long time, and he was always like a breath of fresh air in this office. I think I got adjusted that I would see him every day forever, and it would never change. So it's an adjustment.
It's so touching. Yeah. See, Kevin, you have the same effect on everybody. I feel the same way. But yeah, I got nothing else to say. Thanks everybody. This has been super informative and hopefully, a good opportunity to kind of talk about some of the stuff that I think's kind of on all of our minds. And I think that, we've always kind of set out to try and do things better. And I'm hoping that through this, we can help other people do a better job of it and hopefully cut down on bullshit emails and shitty pitches and totally irrelevant stuff that, ultimately ends up with you guys having a better chance at not having to deal with overload and be able to get your jobs done at a higher level. So I appreciate it. And thanks, Erica. That's about it. I mean, for us, follow, subscribe, all that kind of crap.
Yep, follow the channel. We will be back here again next week at the same time, same place, with another great show for you guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all of our guests today. We will see you guys next week. Have a good one, guys. See ya.
Awesome.